Hello. Today we'll be talking about the Needleman lead experiment. We'll be talking about who Herbert Needleman was, why his paper is so important, and why the experiment that he did led to changes in safety for children. And then we will be talking about how the lead industry tie-ins, due to monetary influence, targeted him for fake allegations of misconduct. So Herbert Needleman was a physician and pediatrician from Pittsburgh. Although these are his actual credentials, he classifies himself as a child psychiatrist. This is because he spent most of his life attempting to understand lead poisoning and to sway the public towards the removal of lead-based products from the market. A very important detail is that he did this in the 70s, and this is important because the 70s is the decade where gasoline had extremely high levels of lead in it. Paint had a lot of lead in it. So the industries of gasoline, automobiles, paint, and others were had a lot of money in lead content. So it is important to note that he did this in a decade that was going to yield a lot of opposition. The government ignores this because at the time we didn't have enough information to make conclusions about why lead was so detrimental. Some agencies like the EPA or the Environmental Protection Agency were starting to make some policy and do some mandates, but nothing was really coming out of it until the paper that we will talk about in this presentation. Here's a small snippet of the first page. The paper was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1979, and the actual title of the paper is Deficits in Psychological and Classroom Performance of Children with Elevated Dentine Lead Levels. This title is important because it is a small window into the methodology as well into why this was performed. This experiment was performed aimed towards understanding the psychological levels of lead poisoning in a classroom environment in terms of cognitive ability and behavioral development. The way that Needleman and his team did this was they gathered 3,329 children. Keep this number in mind, but this number will be thinned greatly due to external uncontrollable variables that we'll talk about later. The team asked teachers to look for consent and asked children to provide teeth, asked their parents to provide teeth. And the reason that they did this was because his teeth were to be provided to the team, and the team was going to test them for lead content. And the way that they were going to do this was through a very interesting technique called anodic stripping. Essentially, what they did was put the teeth on a solution, and the solution would be involved in ionic deposition using electrodes, which later were oxidized, and current was measured. This current fit a specific profile, which allowed them to quantify the levels of whatever ion they wanted, in this case lead. The specimens were then classified into high lead level, which was about 20 parts per million or more, and then low lead level, which was less than 10 parts per million or more, or less, sorry. And then the third group, which was non-concordant values, but this group is not really that important because it was excluded. Here you'll see a figure that essentially shows the frequency of individuals per parts per million. It shows that a lot of individuals were actually quite contaminated with lead. Then Needleman did a little bit of a thinning the herd experiment where he measured parental IQ as well as socioeconomic status. He took into account the inability of some families to talk English. He took into account other uncontrollable variables, and he excluded a lot of individuals, which reduced that big number that we were talking about earlier to about 158 individuals. A lot of this were not removed. They left willingly because they didn't want to be part of it, or they just didn't speak English, or there were issues outside of the team's hands that prevented them from participating. So At the end, 100 high lead level individuals were analyzed, as well as 58 low lead level individuals. These individuals were then challenged with what's known as an intelligence test battery. This is a neuropsychological evaluation that challenges them with different tests, where some of them were verbal, some of them were auditory, and some of them had to do with attention span. This data was then going to be compared to what was known to them as the teacher behavioral scoring, and that consisted of this list of items here on table 2 was provided to the teacher, and then the teacher were to categorize each student into any of these items based on experience. This data was then compared to the lead data using a t-test for comparing low lead versus high lead, ANOVA to comparing all the different items and different descriptors that they had, and then chi-squared to do inclusivity, exclusivity, as well as the teacher behavioral scoring. So what they found is expected to us because we know what lead poisoning is. To them, this was not entirely understood, so maybe it was surprising to them. But high lead dentine levels were extremely detrimental for cognitive ability and behavioral development. They observed during the verbal test, which consisted of sentence repetition, that high lead levels were not able to repeat the sentence properly, or took too long to repeat the sentence, or some of them were uninterested in participating enough that they did it wrong on purpose. The auditory rhythm test, which consisted of listening to small rhythmic snippets and ruling the odd one out, was also interestingly failed by high lead dentine level individuals. Mostly not because they were unable to detect the odd one out, but because of the time that it took for them to do it and the scattered thought process. Then they did the most important test, in my opinion, which is the attention span test. And this test consisted of 4 increasing complexity token tests, which they were faced with a stimuli that elicited a reaction. And this stimuli was delayed by a specific amount of time each time. What they observed is that high lead level individuals had an extremely larger reaction time than low lead individuals. For example, here in figure 3, we can see that in block 3, which was a 12-second delay between stimuli and start, the high lead individuals had a reaction time of about 475 to 500 milliseconds, where low lead individuals had a reaction time of 390 to 400 milliseconds. This is low lead individuals. It is not non-affected individuals, so you could assume that a control of non-affected individuals could be even less of a reaction time, and the disparity could be even larger. This led them to understand that distraction as time progressed was a lot higher for high lead individuals. Children that were exposed to a lot of lead were a lot more distracted, and the attention span was a lot less. This is very important for this next set of results, because then they compared this data to the teacher behavioral scoring, and what they found out is that the teachers were able to perfectly and accurately pinpoint high lead individual students as students with poor behavior. As you can see in table 3, there is significance in almost all the categories. Distractible students are a lot more often affected by lead more than less distractible students. Low lead students were a lot more persistent than high lead students. Dependency, disorganized, hyperactivity, impulsive behavior, daydreaming, all of this bad behavior or poor behavior categories are led by high lead individuals more than by low lead individuals, and the p-values show a lot of significance. So essentially what they found out is that high lead exposure affects attention, retention, verbal capabilities, and behavioral patterns. And this is very important because these are things that children need in order to progress in life enough to be better citizens, to be better people. They need to learn, they need to retain what they learn, they need to pay attention to small things, be able to follow instructions. And all of these were observed to not be possible when they were exposed to high lead levels. So why is this important? This is important because change is required in order for a safer future, which takes us to what, as a scientist, you want to happen after you provide good information, and that is policy. Needleman wanted policy to occur. He wanted change to happen. This started to happen around the 80s. The EPA, or the Environmental Protection Agency, started creating mandates to reduce the concentration of lead in standard gasoline. In 1991, the CDC fired their whole team and hired a whole new management team because they recognized that there was monetary influence at play and that they were at fault for not recognizing the issues with lead poisoning. And things were moving forward. Needleman was observing change happen. And then the heavy opposition occurred, and the industrial titans of the paint industry as well as the gasoline industry brought in representative scientists to say that Needleman had committed misconduct, and he was he was accused of data cherry picking, which is essentially picking the data that you want people to see only and not all of the data. This led to Needleman testifications in 1991 against the industrial lead poisoning to not be founded, and Congress could not approve of any ruling because of the allegations of misconduct. This led to a year-long investigation, which eventually led to nothing. The experiment was ruled to be valid, the data was ruled to be well analyzed, and misconduct was not observed. According to Needleman, later on, he says that this was what the industry wanted. They wanted the red herring. They wanted to make people forget. And he blames himself for this. In an interview, he says, "I blame myself for this. We started the job, we did not finish the job." This is interesting because clearly we can see that the issue was not with him, it was with the industry. So he engaged in some follow-up studies later on to try to bring more information, and he still found the same thing. Low level of lead poisoning affected attention span, affected cognitive ability, affected learning, and behavioral pattern development. This had not changed. So he moved towards trying to make policy change, which, as we know now, it has. A lot of the lead products, like gasoline and paint, do not have lead anymore. Our children are safer. He did the good thing, and we are seeing the fruits now. What are my opinions on this? So, he performed good science. He analyzed his data very well. He covered all of his bases. He was just affected by corporate targeting, by monetary influence, and by the bystander effect. No one did anything. Everyone expected the government to have the ruling. Everyone expected Needleman to stand for himself, but no one really remembered about the issues a year later when the investigation was done. So I think that the real misconduct comes from the scientists that sold themselves to the corporations and lied about their misconduct, as well as ourselves as a society for not standing by good science and good information. Thank you for your time.